Alrighty then, it's time for a jungle Trundle game. Let's get this show on the road. Let's go on. And as you guys know, I love picking Trundle against really positive matchups. Which, to be fair, the enemy team isn't extremely positive for me. It's mostly like a soft positives. Alright, so the only champion of that they have that has like boosted defensive stats that I can take is Jax, and that's when he uses his ultimate, and it's not really that much, so it's not a big deal. But I have softer advantages against the enemy team. I'll explain that after this. I just, casually invade Jax because he's a slower jungler than Trundle, but not considerably slower. But I know if he and I fought early on, I would beat him. So I get to just bully him, damage him, and steal one of his camps. A pretty major camp, so that's pretty good. I mean, he would have probably backed off anyways, so it's not the biggest gain, but stealing one camp in front of him is still just a nice thing either way. For the most part, Jax will outscale me hard, but for the early and mid game, I get to bully him extremely well. Anyways, as I was saying by soft advantages, I meant mostly, look at their composition. They have limited or very predictable movement. Sivir's their only real triumph they have, as she will help them deal with me and the rest of my team composition. But for the most part, their movement is very predictable. They need to either bounce to a ward or a champion or a minion, or it's delayed like Lissandra. So if I use my wall correctly, I'll be able to stop them and trap them and that kind of stuff, right? So I got that going for myself. Also, their burst isn't very high. They do have bursty champions, but they're not notorious for having this extreme giga level kind of burst, if you get what I mean. So if I build myself tanky, which I am, and honestly it's one of my favorite builds, I'll pretty much survive a lot of shenanigans. And again, most of their damage is also sustained, so Trundle does well against that, especially if he's going tanky. Now, as you saw, the early game is rather slow. It's mostly pretty control-based. We're, watching a few players die on their own because they're getting aggressive or, just that kind of thing. Jax, was trying to invade me or something, and I think he saw that I was coming, so he backed off. Again, it's a pretty slow game right now. Then he invades me in my wolves anyways, and this is where I just sort of find it very, very silly because we give chase to him, and, it was just honestly not worth it. He ends up getting killed. So he took my wolves and died for that. It was a little bit too aggressive. So he's going to set himself behind, and I'm going to have him a huge lead. Also, seemingly, he has a very similar build to me right now. Tiamat kind of thing going. At that point, I didn't know what build he was going. I was assuming that he's building Tiamat into Titanic. So if he was doing so, I would have factored in that was rather silly, because that just gives me another additional target to steal. My main target in this game is Jax when he casts his ultimate, or Sion in most cases, so I can get their really big boosted health or resistance. Get what I mean. But anyways, I can't really punish Lissandra there, but you get what I mean. Her movement was predictable, and in other situations, my wall might be able to deal a lot to her, because again, predictable movement. Also, I did want to talk about one thing, that Trundle is starting to see LCS play, mostly as a top laner. And as a jungler, I do not see him being picked as one, unless it is to remove him from the champion pool so the enemy team doesn't pick him, or they have something else in mind, right? For the most part, I don't think Trundle will be picked as a jungler because his options are far more limited, and the gold isn't as reliable as lane. So he's a very build-reliant champion, even though contrary to popular belief. By the way, I love that. That's what the wall, the wall keeps Teemo alive and forces Sion to take way too many tower shots and kill him. So anyways, this is what I mean. Trundle, right now, his main build in lane is going tight, I forgot the Ravenous Hydra, there we go. Sorry. Going Ravenous Hydra, and then building damage, and then going into a little bit tankier form. He gets to push really hard, gets to sustain himself really well. And that's his whole main shtick right now. But that kind of build for Trundle to be offensive and then being this kind of lifesteal tanky, you can see in my hands, I'm doing a quotation mark, lifesteal tank thing requires quite a bit of gold, which is never reliable in the jungle. So in the jungle, you likely end up going more bruiser builds, tank builds with hopefully Titanic Hydra to give yourself some damage, or aura builds, because those are more cost effective and more reliable and predictable. And that's not something you really need in a competitive team right now, I would figure. So he's not going to be picked in jungle anytime soon, I think. Or if he has been, I haven't been seeing it. Anyways, back to the actual game now, because it's starting to heat up. You already saw, you know, Sion got destroyed by Teemo, so he get Teemo, or you know, I helped Teemo not die for that one instance because he's been getting killed by Sion every now and then. So top lane is really weird, but bottom lane, that double kill gank right there just pretty much won them that whole lane phase. And now they get to start roaming around. We get control of Dragon, and essentially the map is ours now. Also here, I don't know if whether Alistar ran into the Sion or my wall stopped it, but Sion's ultimate was really well intercepted. This fight though doesn't really go in our favor. We fight, but we're all choosing completely different targets. I did get a good ultimate off, so I take very little damage initially, but then eventually, as I start getting focused and, you know, my team has no focus and we don't take down targets fast enough, we eventually get killed. In fact, Lissandra gets a quadra kill, and that boosts her tremendously considering she wasn't too far behind in the mid lane already. In fact, she was ahead of Syndra if it wasn't for Syndra having kills. So that's kind of bad. She still probably won't be targeting me, so I don't have to worry about magic resistance as much. Just sort of some, you know, light CC from Mercury Treads. My main targets right now is either controlling the Sivir, but mostly making sure the Jax dies without popping off. It's controlling the Jax kind of thing. Anyways, flash wall to try to force her movement out, which I think she had already used to try to farm. But this forced her to use every other escape she could. And she's still going to get caught eventually because, you know, she's going to get shot at a range. So that was a pretty good gank. It forced her to use absolutely everything. Same thing with Sivir here too. Her movement became super predictable. So she got herself close to a wall and I pinned her against it, or sort of forced her to have to go around it, which gave Alistar enough time to catch up with his headbutt pulverize. So we got a kill on Sivir. This is what I mean by the soft counter. All their movement is super predictable, so my wall, which is already a very powerful ability, just wins the day. Sorry, a little bit of stuttering right there. But still though, Teemo, like every other Teemo I've ever had in the last few videos I've uploaded, gets caught and dies. So hooray for that. So our Baron is good still, but you know, less good because Teemo got himself killed. Again, my build is taking fruition. I'm going Dead Man's Plate for the extra boosted damage. Essentially, I'm just going to be biting people. My whole thing here is a bruiser build. Or a defensive bruiser build, instead of offensive bruiser build, but this still gives you proper offensive capabilities, especially with a red smite. You'll see it come into fruition once the main team fight happens. So, of course, with Baron, we're just trying to get towers, we're poking at them. We got this going now. And with my wall and their predictable movement, I'll be able to at least allow us to retreat. This is one of the Trundle's best boons, of course. Whether or not he's top lane or mid lane, top lane or even support or whatever. His wall, especially against team compositions like the enemy teams, it can just stop them from doing anything and be like this sort of one man retreat force. Here, that whole fight doesn't go as well as I had hoped, but you could see that it took a lot of effort from the enemy team to even bring me down, and I did quite a bit of damage. If my teammates were around, which I'm not blaming them for not being around, we were kind of all scattered, and I probably shouldn't have gotten too gung-ho on that. We would have been able to easily clear them out. Anyhow, our Baron wasn't used as effectively. We mostly just got one tower and we're retreating from then on. Either way, as I was talking about earlier, Trundle is very dependent on his builds. This build that I have just makes me very, meaty. And if I don't get a good ultimate off on somebody, if I get focus fired, I'll drop easily because I'm mostly just a health sponge. So I luckily do get a good ultimate off, so you see me basically take no damage, especially since I smite somebody who's probably going to be hitting me, and it was a Jax. He already died anyways, and so I don't take as much damage as you would have thought. Then we just kind of clean up the rest. It's a pretty brutal victory there. They were positioned poorly. I was their only real target alongside the Alistar, and plus again the Alistar did a really good job there. And essentially they had the worst targets to choose from, who can also mess them up. And my ultimate again got off on a good target, so yeah, I just became super tanky and super blubbery and they couldn't even tickle me. But of course, without that, I would die. Here, I got a good wall against the Braum, and you see it forces his flash out. Again, his mobility is so predictable, and if I get a good wall off, it will pretty much trap them and force them to have to use some escape, or force them to fight in that location, or just die. Now, we get the inhibitor here, and sort of watch how my team kind of scatters. Syndra is being a little bit too brave, right? And it makes it very obvious what the enemy wants to do, what the Sion wants to do. So I'm keeping myself around within range of my wall, just to stop Sion's ultimate the second he tries it. So there. And as soon as that happens, I get a good ultimate off on the Jax, draining whatever power he's receiving, and then I just go to town on the enemy team. Of course, yeah, Syndra and the rest of them are also doing a hell of a good job of destroying them, or at least Syndra is. The rest are kind of scattered about. They're taking care of Jax, I mean. And then we just clean up the rest of them. See, that fight was extremely good, because once again, their only viable target was me. And at that point, you know, they could barely tickle me. I had a good ultimate off. I stopped Sion's whole rampage. It forced him to basically... He was in such a bad position, he was basically ineffective until everyone sort of went into the whole entire fight. But at that point, his team had already lost, so he was just kind of dying alongside him. It was a pretty gruesome fight, but it just kind of shows that when you pick Trundle, or you pick any champion against a team composition he can do really well against, and you don't get completely smashed in the beginning of the game, you could just absolutely run away with the game. So hooray for Trundle. So remember, if you liked this video, make sure to give it a like and a subscribe if you haven't yet. This helps more than you think it does. Yeah, that's a meme at this point, but it seems people want me to say that at the end of my videos now. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video and you have a good day.